Welcome back to the Redhead Report. I'm Elie Gelman, and these are my Week 8 quarterback rankings for fantasy football. It's the bye-apocalypse. This week, there are 6 teams on bye, which means a lot of you are going to be missing your starting quarterback. Players like Jared Goff, Trevor Lawrence, Matthew Stafford are not playing this week, so you have to pivot, go to the waiver wire, and that's what we're here to talk about. Go over all the starting quarterbacks for this week in fantasy football. We did tight ends earlier, so make sure you look at that video. It will be in the bio below. But let's not waste any more time and let's just get right into it. Starting off with my number one quarterback for the week, I have Patrick Mahomes. He's the number one quarterback in fantasy through 7 weeks. Just got Rashee Rice back playing against a weak Commanders defense that gives up over 20 points. Bottom 8 in fantasy points given up to quarterbacks. Scored 30 points. The Chiefs have scored 30 points in the past three out of the 4 last weeks. So this offense is firing on all cylinders. So Patrick Mahomes is number one for me. And then looking at Josh Allen against Carolina at the number 2 spot, he's been really bad. The last 2 games he played against New England and Atlanta has not been putting up the Josh Allen quarterback 1 numbers that we all expected. I drafted him expecting him to be the top quarterback in fantasy football. He's still up there, but hasn't been playing like that. But now coming off a bye against a weak Carolina defense that has taken a step back from last year, I'm expecting a big game for Josh Allen, a get-right game for him and this Bills team. And then a quarterback that we haven't seen on the field in a little bit, Lamar Jackson, is at my number 3 spot. Has been hurt with a hamstring injury, but similar to Josh Allen, coming off the bye, he's going to be extra healthy against a Chicago defense that is ranked bottom 7 in points given up to quarterbacks. So I'm expecting a big game from Lamar, from Derrick Henry. I would start all your Ravens against this Chicago Bears team, and looking like Lamar is going to get back to being a top 3 quarterback after that injury. And now those are the top 3 guys. Not a surprise. We've expected them to be there. But now let's get to tier number 2, which is what they are. The second tier guys. A lot of these guys are going to be starting on your team and should be starting. Just they don't have the upside that these top 3 guys have. And starting off with Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts has always been fantasy viable, even if he's not passing the ball, because he's just such a phenomenal runner, and they scheme for him to score touchdowns, basically rushing touchdowns, basically every single game. But again, last week against Minnesota, had over 300 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, a perfect passer rating. So the passing game is starting to pick up for this Eagles team. A.J. Brown did not practice today. Today's Thursday. He didn't practice today with a hamstring injury, or he was limited. So that's something to monitor. But even if he doesn't play, Devontae Smith has been playing really well, and hopefully they'll get Saquon more involved, and they're not going to lose twice to the Giants. So I'm expecting a big game from Hurts. And then looking at my number 6 spot, Baker Mayfield against New Orleans. Baker Mayfield, I think, would be a little bit higher on this list, but I'm downgrading him because of the injuries to his receivers. He only really has Emeka. Tez Johnson has, had a little bit of a coming out party, but he's still a rookie. Cade Otton has not been so reliable. Those guys are all, I think, good fantasy options, Tez Johnson and Cade Otton. But Baker Mayfield, the question is just how much longer is he going to be able to play Superman for this injured team? The Saints are 11th in the league in giving up fantasy points to quarterbacks. So, right kind of around the middle of the pack. So I don't think it's going to be an amazing game for Baker Mayfield, but you have to play him, and he's a top 5 play for me. And then my 6 and 7 guys are playing against each other. Bo Nix versus Dak Prescott. I would actually have Dak Prescott, I think, ahead of both of these guys, but I'm downgrading him a little bit due to the matchup and also due to the weather. They're playing in Denver, outdoors, not expected to be such a great game. So I'm expecting kind of a low-scoring game for the Broncos versus Cowboys. Either way, Dak has a lot of great options. CD, Pickens, Javonte, Ferguson have all been amazing fantasy options. So Dak Prescott is still a must start. And then also Bo Nix, who's been shaky in some games, but last week against the Giants probably won you your week, had 40 points. And this Dallas defense cannot stop anybody. They give up the most points to quarterback, over 25 points per week to starting quarterbacks. So Bo Nix, he's a must start. He's, I think, going to have a big game. I don't expect this game to be as high scoring as the Giants versus Broncos game was, but Bo Nix is still going to score plenty of touchdowns for your fantasy team. And rounding it off, the last guy in this tier is Drake May. I think Drake May is actually, I'm downgrading him a little bit than what he would be because his matchup is just really difficult. Playing against Cleveland, we saw what Cleveland did to Tua last week. Absolutely dismantled him. 3 interceptions. It was not a pretty game to watch. But the Cleveland Browns are 30th in the NFL at quarterback fantasy points, giving up less than 14 per game. Obviously, Drake May is an MVP candidate, one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL, but downgrading him a little bit because of this matchup. And now we get into our third tier here, starting off with Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has surprisingly been unbelievable to start the year. Really, I don't even know how many 20-point games he's had. Really consistent play from Daniel Jones against a Tennessee team that he played well against in week 3. So if you have Daniel Jones, there's no reason to not have confidence in this Colts offense, in this Colts team. 7 weeks into the season, fire up Daniel Jones if you got him with confidence. Rounding off this tier, I have Caleb Williams and Jordan Love. Caleb Williams, I'm actually upgrading this week a little bit strictly because of his matchup. He's playing against Baltimore, which is the second best matchup for quarterbacks to play against. They give up 22 points per week to fantasy quarterbacks. This team can't stop anybody. We've seen, the perfect example is CJ Stroud against this Baltimore Ravens defense. That offense looked amazing. The Texans offense that can't score against anybody looked like a top 5 offense against the Ravens. So upgrading Caleb Williams this week, I think he's going to have a big week, could end up finishing as a QB1. But if we look at moving on now to Jordan Love, playing against Pittsburgh, Jordan Love is not exciting to me. He has the high upside because he's really talented. He has the weapons around him, but his floor is like 8 points. Like, they could win the game very, very convincingly, and he could not have a big game. So I'm not so excited about Jordan Love, but he's just one of those guys that, depending on who else you have on your team, you might just have to start him, and you might just have to, roll the dice with Jordan Love. And now we get into this tier that is kind of a lot of players, if you're in a deeper league or waiver wire options. And my number one waiver wire option at quarterback this week was Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart, he didn't even have a rough start in the NFL, really. He started against the Chargers and has just hit the ground running, been a really good fantasy quarterback. We saw what he did last week against the Broncos. I think he had 30 plus points, was really, really good. And he performed well against the Eagles a couple weeks ago when they played. Do I think he's going to play as well as he did then? No, I think the Eagles are going to dominate this game. But either way, he has the rushing upside. I think they're going to be down a lot in this game, so he's going to have to make a lot of plays. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a rushing touchdown, some garbage time, big throws from Jackson Dart. And if you're in a pinch, because like we mentioned, it's the Bipocalypse, and if you picked up Jackson Dart, I would play him, and I would have confidence that he's going to have a good week. Another option at the waiver wire spot is Michael Penix Jr. Besides a couple of games, Michael Penix Jr. has not been great. He did not perform well against San Francisco last Sunday night, but they're playing Miami, and Miami is what I think they are the worst defense in the NFL. Their rush defense is last in the NFL. Their pass defense is solid, but I just think this is a game where the Falcons are going to score a lot of points, and I want to start a quarterback that's going to be in a game that's going to score a lot of points. So Michael Penix Jr., again, if you are in a pinch, if you don't have Jared Goff or Matthew Stafford this week, and you picked up Michael Penix, I would play him, and I would think that he's going to have a solid game. I don't think he's going to lose you your week, but I don't think he's going to necessarily win you your fantasy matchup this week. And that's kind of what you're looking at when you getting a waiver wire quarterback. And then at 14 and 15, I have Aaron Rodgers and CJ Stroud. I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to actually have a pretty good game against Green Bay. This is kind of a revenge game for Rodgers. He's the type of guy that wants to perform well against his former team. I think he's going to put on a little bit of a show. I expect multiple touchdowns from Rodgers. And then looking at the 15th spot, we have CJ Stroud, who has been just flat out just really disappointing this year in fantasy. There's no other way about it. We were expecting this offense to be much better than it is. And on top of that, Nico Collins is probably not going to play with a concussion. So I'm downgrading CJ Stroud a little bit, but I think that the Nico Collins injury might help him a little bit. I think that the offensive coordinator is going to simplify this offense for CJ Stroud because the offensive line is terrible. There's no time for him to throw any type of deep ball. That's why I'm actually expecting Woody Marks to have a pretty solid game. I think they're going to throw it out in the flat a lot, short passes, and that's going to, I think, benefit CJ Stroud, but he's still not going to have the best fantasy game. And then at my 18th spot, just looking ahead, I have Marcus Mariota, really just because of the rushing upside. Jaden Daniels is out. This Chiefs defense is a top 3 defense in the NFL. They only give up 17 points per game to their opposition. So Marcus Mariota, really just because he can run, he could score a rushing touchdown that saves his fantasy week. But then, I have here Justin Fields and Tyrod Taylor. Not sure who's gonna play. Both of them are I was gonna say both of them are banged up. Justin Fields isn't banged up. He just sucks. And then Tyrod Taylor is banged up. And I think if Tyrod Taylor was fully healthy, they would probably play him over Fields because Fields has just had an abysmal 2 weeks in a row. But either way, I think that both of them are very similar, have kind of the same rushing upside, the same passing ability, which is kind of capped, which isn't great. But I'm going to put both of them at my 17 spot. I played Justin Fields last week. He lost me my matchup. So that's just, you have to be wary of that. I think these 3 guys, Justin Fields, CJ Stroud, and Marcus Mariota, again, you have to be wary with them. All 3 of those guys can lose you your matchup. So this is the ranking I have them, but I wouldn't be comfortable playing any of these guys. And then rounding it off with the last tier here, these guys are the bottom of the bottom. Hopefully you won't have to play any of these guys. These are if you're in a really deep league or the waiver wire is really sparse in your league. None of these guys excite me. These are all either rookies or quarterbacks that have been really poor this week. Spencer Rattler plays against Tampa Bay. He, I think, has the highest upside. The Tampa Bay defense is not great and has been injured, so that's a benefit for the Saints team playing at home. Chris Olave and Rattler have seemed to formed a little bit of a connection in New Orleans, so he's a solid option. Joe Flacco, I would like to play, but he's playing against the Jets, and their secondary is really good. Sauce Gardner is going to be able to shut down Jamar Chase. He's not just going to be able to throw him the ball 20 times like he did against the Steelers. Mac Jones also downgrading him because he's playing against Houston. They are 32nd. They give up 10 points a week to opposing quarterbacks. So they're phenomenal. That's a terrible matchup for Mac Jones. Bryce Young, injured, may play, may not play. Buffalo has a weak secondary, but I don't really like this defense. I don't really like this offense for Carolina right now. They seem to be a little bit out of sorts. We saw that they couldn't really score against the Jets. And I think Buffalo is going to have a big game. They're going to come out swinging post-bye. They've lost 2 in a row. So I'm not expecting a big game from either Bryce Young or Andy Dalton. And then these last 3 guys are on the worst offenses in the NFL. Dylan Gabriel. New England actually has been really good against the run. So I think that Dylan Gabriel is going to have to throw a little bit more. They can't just rely on Judkins in the run game. So that could be a big game for Gabriel because the Patriots are around the middle of the pack, giving up around 15 points per week to fantasy quarterbacks. And then Tua playing against Atlanta. They are 31st in the NFL in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, giving up 13 points per week. So really not excited about Tua. And Cam Ward against Indianapolis. They are not the best pass defense, but you can't trust anything that this offense does. They're really bad. Cam Ward has looked like a rookie. The running backs aren't really helping him out. And the wide receivers, besides Calvin Ridley, who doesn't look like he's going to play this week, they do not have the offensive ability to really help Cam Ward to be a viable fantasy option. So that's the tier list that I got here. Hopefully this is going to help you guys out, help you with your decision making when it comes to the Bipocalypse this week. These are my quarterback rankings. If you want to see my tight end rankings and the rest of my rankings, make sure you go to the bio. I have videos on all of those, plus the written out rankings on my Substack. So make sure you don't miss any of that. And make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Substack so you get notifications about those rankings. And thank you guys so much for watching, and good luck this week.